All right. Good evening and welcome to another episode of the Relationships series. Glad that you all are here this evening. For those of us who are here, I do like to start on time, and we can allow for those who are sort of straggling in to join us when they can. Um, and they can jump in. So tonight we will be talking about difficult conversations. For those of you who do not know me, I am Genevieve. I am a registered psychotherapist. I'm also a speaker, trainer, and a coach. And my favorite thing to talk about is relationships because they are the life and breath and purpose of how we exist. We are created for relationships of all kinds, whether they are friendship based or whether they are work related, whether they are romantic or familial. We rise and fall, we live and breathe in terms of relationships. And so it would behoove us not to take time to really delve into the nitty gritty, the components, the elements of what relationships are all about and what makes them great. Because we know, I mean, if we're any age above puberty, we know that a relationship can make or break us. And so we want them to make us. We want to be part of purposeful partnerships. We want to be part of destiny partnerships. We want to be part of healthy relationships. And so we get a chance to come here into this space and talk about the things that can trip us up at times and some of the things that we don't necessarily take time out to really focus in on. And one of those things is difficult conversations. And this is part of conflict resolution, conflict management. And we know that because we are different people, we are going to find ourselves in disagreements with others on a regular basis. So, why not figure out how to handle and manage those disagreements in the best way possible for the best outcomes possible? So, that's what we're going to be talking about today. As usual, we have an overview. We will be going through definitions. We'll look at difficult and the relativity thereof because we each have a different definition internally as it relates to what's difficult for us based on our level of maturity, based on our level of experience in life, and of course, based on our relationships and what we've experienced within them. So we will get a chance to talk about that today. We'll also look at the building blocks of difficult conversations, some quotes, of course, some statistics, and we'll look at some tips and tricks, or the art part, I like to call it, of difficult conversations. So some practical application, and then I'll give you guys a challenge, and then we'll look at what's coming up, and then we'll be off to the races and looking forward to next week. So our format today, very similar to our other formats. Again, I want to encourage us all to join in the conversation. If there's something that piques your interest, something that resonates with you, you can feel free to throw a comment in the chat. You can also unmute your mic, throw your hand up, mute your mic, and share with us some of what's going on for you. Join the conversation. It is for that purpose that we meet. And I also do want to give a disclaimer. I'm not an expert per se. I'm just someone who is passionate about relationships and who has been studying relationships for the greater part of her life. So I know some people are, oh, you're an expert, and so no, I'm not an expert, but I have done a lot of work and research in this area because I love it and because I know that if we get it right, if we learn how to do these relational things well, that our lives will become so much better. And I don't just say that because the studies have shown or the research has shown. I say that because I've literally lived it out. Like I have walked this walk and created and really poured into cultivating healthy relationships, and it's been hard, but it has been worth it. And so I speak from a place of just experience but also passion because I know this stuff works. I know it's helpful, and I'm hoping that it just adds value to you and becomes like a source of joy and edification in your lives. So That's my sort of disclaimer there. So I say that to say, don't take what I say and some of my opinions to the bank and say, Genevieve says and so on. But for sure, let's have conversation about even our differences of opinion as it pertains to relationships and specifically today, difficult conversations as well. All right, let's jump in. I always start with a definition to ground us. So we're talking about difficult conversation. Difficult means needing much effort or skill to accomplish, deal with, or understand. I love the effort and the skill part. It takes effort and it takes skill. It takes effort to build skill, right? But if we have the skill, we need the effort to apply the skill, right? So it is difficult, but it's possible. Okay. Conversations are a talk, especially an informal one, between two or more people in which news and ideas are exchanged, right? So we get to share our opinions, we get to share our ideas, we get to share whatever is going on for us in our lives. That is the essence of conversation. And so a difficult conversation is a talk that requires much effort or skill to accomplish as we share those ideas or those opinions. Okay. So we want to keep that in mind as we consider our conversation today in terms of difficult conversations. Okay, uh, so we'll jump in here. So this is for you if one, you are currently preparing for a difficult conversation, and so I get a chance to have conversations daily, and some of those conversations are. Joining with others to prepare as they go into a difficult conversation with their spouse or with a family member or with a boss. And so if you're currently preparing for a difficult conversation, if you sort of have something in the back of your mind and you're thinking, oh man, I've been avoiding, some of us are avoiders, are very notorious avoiders. um, but if you have one coming up, this will be helpful for you. Take some notes and jump in, perhaps ask a question, get some feedback, and then be better prepared for the difficult conversation, right? So one of the definitions of a difficult conversation is a planned talk, or a prepared for talk that can be challenging for us. Okay. This is for you if you have had bad experiences with difficult conversations. So sometimes I'll qualify the word bad. So bad is a descriptor meaning that somewhere inside of you, you were unsatisfied with the outcome of that conversation from your end. Right. And so if you had a bad experience, it means that you said something, did something, perhaps it escalated into a place where you didn't want to go. You behaved in ways, you spoke in ways and tones and words that were outside of your sort of comfort zone. You didn't want to show up that way, right? So that's how I qualify a bad experience with a difficult conversation. Um, so this is for you if that has happened, if you've shut down, maybe withdrawn, haven't been able to get the words out. If that for you is considered unsatisfying or bad, then this is for you as well. And we'll talk about some ways to bypass some of those initial responses, like shutting down or lashing out, which are on the two ends or extremes of a spectrum when it comes to having these kinds of conversations about disagreements. And then this is for you if you want to improve your ability to have difficult conversations. Okay. And so that's what this is all about. This is all about growing and learning. All right. So these are the three most difficult conversations, as we call them, or sorry, most the top topics, I should say, that we have difficult conversations about. Um, and the note here is difficult conversations at work are dreaded more than talking about personal issues. So most difficult conversations, people say 19% say sex, difficult conversation, relationship breakups, 17% say this is a difficult conversation. And then money, issues about money. So that could be like, oh, you're fired. Where's the money going to come from? You have to go home and tell your spouse that you no longer have any money or no longer have an income. I find race issues to be a difficult conversation. I've talked about anyway. What are your most difficult conversations? You can throw it in the chat. Let me know what's been hard for you. Um, I know race issues for me have been difficult conversations. Um, And health related conversations have been somewhat difficult as well, especially when getting good news about either your health or the health of a loved one. So that's been challenging as well. um yeah, I don't know. You guys can share what your difficult conversations have been. Maybe you've been drawn into a difficult conversation. Maybe you haven't been the one to desire the conversation. You haven't been the one to say, "Hey, let's talk about this difficult thing." But maybe you were drawn into or asked to have a difficult conversation where someone else expressed something to you. So you can throw that in the chat, and we can talk about that as well. Um, Let me try to think my most difficult conversation. I think um telling my ex-husband that I wanted a divorce was probably one of the most difficult conversations that I've ever had in my life. I think that was probably it, because I remember my exact words. I remembered my exact words. I said, "You know what? I love you, but I'm not going to stay with you." And that was a hard conversation to have, because I had to like sit down and prepare for it and look him in the eyes. And when you make vows to someone, you make vows for life, right? Till death do you part, and then you go back on your vows. And I did that. I went back on my vows, and I had to say, yeah, that's not a thing. So that was definitely my most difficult conversation. Um, oh, I see some in the chat. Um, Telling someone their poor oral hygiene has proven. Yes, Simone, I love it. So telling someone that their breath smells, their breath smells. Here, would you like a mint or a piece of gum? Yeah, that's not an easy conversation either. Um, and then Jada, certain converse with family. Yeah, there's so many links, so many emotional ties and links when it comes to family, and so much history. There's so much history which ties into like so much expectation. So yeah, family conversations are a thing. Yeah. Um, Becky, thank you so much. Sexual abuse. That is a difficult conversation. Yes, indeed. That's probably that, and here I go self-disclosing here, but that's probably tied for number one of my difficult conversations, tell having to share with my mother what happened to me as a child. And I was an adult at the time. And so, yeah, sexual abuse for sure. First of all, it's a taboo topic. Perhaps we should talk about that in relationships. We should have a relationship series episode on sexual abuse. We did last season, we did power and abuse, but we didn't focus in on sexual abuse. But that is a hard one. It's just, first of all, it's a taboo topic. Second of all, it's just tied to so much pain and trauma. And then third of all, my goodness, what is the reception we're going to get, especially as women? There's so many ways it could go sideways. I've sat in circles with women who have been sexually abused, who shared with their parents or with their mother specifically, and then they weren't believed. The mother took the side of the abuser, if it was a male romantic figure in the home, like just some stuff. So yeah, definitely resonate with those hard conversations, those difficult conversations to have. Those are just difficult topics in general. So yeah, thanks for throwing that in the chat, guys. Okay, so let's go through some myths as it pertains to um, these conversations. We know that if you've been here around here any length of time, perceptions, the way that we think and frame things, shape how we feel about the things and how we respond to those things. And so, if somebody walks by me and I think to myself, "Oh, they didn't say hi to me because I did something to them, I did something wrong," or whatever the case might be, I might feel bad, I might feel shy, I might feel a certain way, and then I might avoid them, or I might try to do something nice for them to get them back in my good graces or what have you. And all of that from a perception or a framing, right? But if somebody walks by me and I think, and they don't say hello, and I think, oh, they're having a bad day, or they didn't see me or what have you, right? That's my perception in the moment, and that shapes how I feel. I may not feel, I probably won't feel like slighted or offended, right? I'll feel maybe compassion and empathy for that person. Whoa, they're going through a lot, right? And then that will shape how I behave or how I respond towards them. So our perceptions shape how we feel, and they also determine and impact and affect what we do, how we behave. Um, so the implication is here is that our understanding and framing of conversations or difficult conversations will fuel our expectations and will lead us to particular conclusions about the conversation itself. So if we think about the conversation in a certain way, we'll show up to the conversation in a certain way, and then the conversation will go a certain way. I hope you guys are following that. Okay. So here's some myths, and these are directly connected back to our perceptions. So here's a myth. Conversation should not be hard. That is a myth. Okay. And so I've heard this a ton of times. Well, it shouldn't have to be that. It shouldn't have to be this way. It shouldn't have to be so hard. Well, the reality is, we're dealing with human beings. We are complicated. We are complex. We are so intricate. There are so many levels and layers as it pertains to our lived experiences. And so we never really know what's informing us at any given moment unless we take the time to be extremely introspective and reflective. And we'll talk about that in the strategies. But that makes for a difficult space to live in. Like, we live in context with other human beings who have whole entire histories just as we do, and have so many so much information coming at them at any given moment, and they're reacting out of that, and we're reacting out of that, and there's never a way to know what is going to come up. We can predict to a certain degree if we're in intimate relationship with other people. But given that idea, that thought, like, we're all complex, we all have our life experiences, whether it's trauma, whether it's triumph, whatever the case might be, our personality differences, our nurture versus nature, all that stuff. Like, conversations are just difficult. Conversations are hard. Right? We have to get to a place where we're willing to learn, we're willing to listen, we're willing to be curious, we're willing to explore. And that takes effort and energy. If you guys have been around, you've heard of us talking about active listening, right? It takes energy. I literally listen for a living. It drains me. It takes energy. It takes effort. It takes focus. And so conversations in and of themselves, if we consider them, they are hard. And so the idea that they shouldn't be hard, it it kind of works against us, because when we get into a hard conversation, we're like, oh, no, 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 this shouldn't, something's wrong, and we have to, beeline out of there as quickly as possible. So we never get to the resolution. We never get sort of to the crux of the matter. So again, we're talking about perceptions. Um, Another myth: when you speak clearly. This is an absolute myth. There's a quote. It says, one of the most interesting things about communication is the illusion that it's actually taken place. It's something along those lines. And so when we speak, we think we're speaking clearly. I think I'm speaking extremely clearly to you right now, but it may not be the case. Sometimes that we have our own filters where we hear what we want to hear. Let's be honest. Let's be very real. We add our assumptions. We jump to conclusions. We have our own internal narratives that we're using to filter the information. We're generalizing. We're doing black and white thinking. We're doing all the things. Okay. And so we do that when we hear people, much more so when we speak. Right. So I think I'm speaking extremely clearly. I'm like, yes, they're getting everything. You're getting 16% of what I'm saying. Right. So another myth is that when we speak clearly. And that's why sometimes, well, most times I ask for feedback. Okay, so what are you guys hearing? What's going on? What's your experience? What's your what do you want to throw into the chat, right? Because that gives us both an opportunity, or gives us all an opportunity to get to a more level ground when it comes to understanding and clarity. Okay, so when we speak, we're not always clear. That's the reality, right? We come from our own experience, so we have to check in and find out if the point that we are trying to make, or the objective that we have, or the message that we're attempting to convey is getting through. I think there was a movie called Lost in Translation. It was something along those lines. But it was all about sort of the messaging and how, oh, I don't know if you guys remember, there was a game when we were kids. It was Broken Telephone. And then you had to whisper, you got a message, and then you have to whisper the message all around the circle, and by the time it got to the last person, the message was completely different. Like that always floored me. It was like, what? How did that even happen? And that is, of course, yes, absolutely classic example, right? That's of course, I mean, hey, when we speak, we think we speak clearly. We think that all the message is getting through, but it's not always. So it's important to get feedback and to check in. Okay. Another myth when it comes to conversations, people understand what we mean. And that is, again, not always true. People may hear what we say and may even be able to parrot it back. But again, the meaning is attached to our internal understanding, our internal narratives, and our internal lived experience. So they may not always understand what we mean. And so we have to do the back and forth thing. Okay, so what are you hearing? What is that? What's it, what does that mean? What is Go into more detail. Not everybody's going to take the time to read between the lines. And so sometimes we have to do our due diligence. Okay. Especially if we're entertaining one of these particular conversations. And nobody goes into difficult conversations unless the stakes are of some value to them. Nobody's going to have a difficult conversation with I don't know, the grocery store clerk. Like, who cares, right? We're having these difficult conversations and preparing for them with people that we care about and that we love, that we have invested interest in. Okay, so it's worth taking the time then to begin to do the work that makes us get to the that helps us get to the place where we understand what we mean. And then another myth is your intentions are pure and obvious. So, no, our intentions are not usually pure, or not always pure, I should say, maybe usually pure, but not always pure. Sometimes we are looking to get a certain result. Sometimes we are looking for validation. Sometimes we are, trying to get something. And so we'll talk about some of the strategies in a moment. That is another myth. We hold ourselves in high regard. We hold ourselves to a high standard, right? We have attribution bias, so to speak, where we think, oh, our motives and intentions are so great, but we don't apply that always to the other person in the conversation with us, right? And so we'll look at how to avoid hijacking our capacity to enter into these conversations and to win, so to speak. Okay, so those are some myths. Here are some things that make the conversation difficult. And I didn't post this, but you've probably seen it. It's the unhelpful thinking styles chart. So thoughts, narratives, and distortions, or cognitive distortions, are some of the things that make our conversations the most difficult ever. So, unhelpful thinking styles include things like oversimplifying, dismissing, minimizing, blaming, black or white thinking, right? So, that's all or nothing thinking. There are only two options, there's no gray area. Generalizing or overgeneralizing or exaggerating things, right? So, and making assumptions and jumping to conclusions are things, all of these sort of ways of thinking always, and I don't use the word always a lot, but always make for difficult conversations, because we go in and we already know what's going to be said, what the person is thinking and feeling, what the person's motivations and intentions are. Oh my goodness, can we just let the conversation happen? Right? So our thoughts, our internal narrative, again, our perceptions, and our distortions will make conversations even more difficult than they need to be. Emotional dysregulation is for sure something that makes conversations difficult. And emotional dysregulation just means that we're experiencing heightened or intense emotions on the inside, so our physiology, and that is hijacking. I don't know if you guys, we've done this before. So this is our brain, this is our thinking brain, this is our feeling brain on the inside. We can talk about hippocampuses and amygdalas and all the things. But for now, we'll just go with um, basic terms. So cerebral cortex, thinking brain, and then in here, feeling brain. And so when we get heightened in our emotion, our thinking brain goes offline, right? And then our feeling brain in here is like, woohoo, whoopee, yay, when the boss is the way the cats play. And so it takes time. In fact, I think studies show that it takes about 90 seconds of calm state to bring our thinking brain back online when we've spiked or when we've peaked in emotional intensity. Right. So when we get anxious, when we get afraid, when we get excited, when something happens, or when we get into maybe one of these spaces, we get angry, right? um our bodies need a moment, our brains need a moment, to calm down. It is highly ineffective to make attempts to have a coherent conversation requiring our thinking brain, requiring our cognition when our cognition is offline and our emotions are at a peaked state. And so we need to take a moment, 90 seconds preferably, to allow our thinking brain to come back online and then to move into the space where we can articulate well, where we can think through what we're saying, where we can plan what we're saying, and then we can do so in a way that respects and honors the relationship or that gets us closer to or moves us in the direction of our desired outcome. And our desired outcome is likely to find some kind of resolution, to come to some sort of agreement, or to reconnect with the person that we're having this difficult conversation with, or to come to mutual understanding of some sort. Okay. So emotional dysregulation, no, no, no. That makes for even more difficult conversation. So we want to make sure we're calm. And then if we approach it like a battle, we want to win. I heard a quote this was last year. It was a question. Um, and the gentleman said, "Do you want to win? Do you want to win the fight, or do you want a relation, or do you want to win your relationship? Do you want to have a relationship, or do you want to win the fight?" Was the question, and I loved the question. It wasn't posed to me necessarily, but I heard it, and I was like, "Yeah, I love that," because you have to make a choice, right? Is this the hill that you want to die on, right? Or is the relationship more important to you? And so, if the relationship is more important to you, then we don't approach these conversations like they're a battle. We approach them like they might be challenging, but they're not a fight to the win, to the death, right? So, if I win, then you lose. If you win, then I lose. And then what happens to the relationship, right? So, we want to make sure we think about that as we go into difficult conversations. Um, Other things that make for difficult conversation, lacking skill in communication, and this is just an area that we all need to basically grow in and pour time and energy into in order to grow in. Communication happens, but good communication or effective communication, which we talked about last season, um, doesn't just happen. So communication is always happening. We're always communicating one towards the other. Our body language, our nonverbals, our tones, our words, all the things, our facial expressions. We're communicating messaging, but we're not always communicating effectively. We're not always communicating exactly what we want to communicate. Okay. So lacking of skill, yes, that's going to do it. But of course, that's a gap that we can certainly bridge with learning and putting some energy and effort into. And then any of the four horsemen, we've talked about this as well. The four horsemen of the apocalypse are from they're from Revelation in the Bible. But Dr. John Gottman from the Gottman Institute has coined the term, and he's adapted it to marital relationships or romantic relationships, and what determines the end or the ending of a romantic relationship are these four horsemen: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. And so, if any of these particular ways of engaging in conversation are a part of your relationship, are a part of your everyday interaction, then that can signify that you're moving towards the ending of that relationship. And the Gottman Institute predicts divorce within 7 years of meeting a couple at 94%. They have 94% accuracy. They've been doing research on in couples for the last 40 plus years. 94% accuracy, and that is unheard of. But it says something. Hey, there are certain predictors of divorce or the ending of a relationship. I love this quote. It says, "Difficult conversations often have to happen because better conversations didn't." And that is so true. And I think this speaks to the tendency for us to avoid when things feel like, oh no, kind of, oh, I don't know, we get a little bit nervous, and so we avoid the difficult conversation. But then that makes for even more difficult conversations. Okay, and so this is where the relative part comes in, because a difficult conversation for some of us could be simply, hey, I didn't really like when you said that to me. I didn't appreciate your tone. And I always give this example. I was talking to a friend of mine once, and I'm just talking in my regular, what I think is my regular voice. And she paused when I had finished saying what I was saying, and she didn't respond to what I said. She responded to how I said it. She said, "I don't like your tone." Just like that, very calm, very matter of fact. Just, "I don't like your tone." And I had to check myself. I was like, "Oh, whoa, okay. Let me backtrack. Let me pedal back." But that could have been, some people's baseline in terms of what's difficult. And so not many of us, or not all of us, can approach it like that, can address things in the moment, calmly, respectfully, in a loving way, but in a direct and honest way, right? And then there may be some fear as well about how the other person will take it, because I could have been belligerent and been like, "Well, I don't care if you," and then all the things. I'm not necessarily like that, but that could have been a fear that prevented her from speaking up about what she didn't like or what she was hearing. So, um, you know, there's levels, to what we might consider difficult conversation. But if that conversation maybe didn't happen, that could have went on and on and on and on until she exploded, and then "You always," and then everything in the kitchen sink comes in. "And that time when I did this and you did this and when we went there," and all the last 16 years you've been holding in all these, these sort of micro offenses, because you were afraid to have a conversation, or because you were avoiding a difficult conversation. And now, the ultimate in difficult conversations has to happen. So I love that quote. And so that's just an encouragement to us all, right? To do the work of learning the skill of entering into difficult conversation, so that better conversations can happen, and then less difficult conversations have to happen. Okay, what not to say in a conversation? Okay, I love these. Um, these, okay, what are they? There's seven of them. Okay, these are just words, but I want you guys to, when I say them, I want you guys to really, like, notice or observe what happens inside of you when I say them. Think about, like, if you've ever been in a hard conversation, you've been trying to express yourself, um, and you've been trying to be honest. You're trying to say what you want to say. Maybe you're asking for a I don't know, whatever the hard conversation is for you. Um, and then and maybe a romantic partner, because those ones are usually pretty easy to spot. And then someone says, "Well, clearly," and honestly, just, it's like a dig. Like, I just feel like, shut up, like, stop right now. Sorry. The word itself is just, like, not clearly, because nothing is clear here. If things were clear here, we wouldn't be having this conversation, right? So anyway, clearly, and very similarly, the word obviously. Well, obviously. Well, nothing is obvious here. That's why we're having this conversation, to clear the air so that we can come into a place of understanding, right? So these words. So think about how they make you feel. You always, anything that starts with "you" just bothers me altogether. But "you always" or "you never." And my goodness, how untrue and inaccurate that is. There's never a time, nowhere in the history of life, where anything happens all the time, or never of the time, right? Um, so "you always," "you never," just avoid these like the plague. Avoid them, because although we know we don't mean always and never, it comes out. It's absorbed. It's received, um, as and it's very flippant, and it's very, like, it's very all encompassing. There's like nowhere to go from there. It's very, like, boxing in. So avoid these words, avoid these terms, avoid these labels, avoid these phrases, when you are in conversation. "You're so sensitive." That is another one to avoid. If you have, and I hear this a lot, from men, funny enough, um, when they're speaking to their wives, or their significant others. I'm not sure about the prevalence in same-sex relationships, but I do know, that it takes place a lot in more, what do you call them, heteronormative relationships. So "you're so sensitive." Stay away from that phrase. Stay away. Um, it's an emotional conversations. Emotions are going to be a part of the difficult conversation. Okay. It doesn't mean they need to hijack the conversation, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. But they're going to be a part of it. And so there is sensitivity there. It's not so sensitive, it's just being human, right? So avoid that because, first of all, you're saying you, and there's no space and place for that. It's not going to end well. It's just not, it's not going to end well. Okay. Um, so avoid that. And then you should anything in a conversation, just turn the other way. Don't even go near the shoulds. Okay. You should do this and you should be this and you should have done. Whoa, take a deep breath. Just keep it far from you. Okay. Because it's just not helpful. It's not helpful for the conversation to move it forward. And it doesn't feel good for the other person. And then I understand or sorry you feel that way. These are very flippant terms you don't understand. There's no way for us to fully understand somebody else. And then sorry you feel that way is just very like you're not taking ownership for the role that you're playing or the part that you're playing in the co-creation of this difficult conversation or the circumstances that led to the difficult conversation. And if you're having a difficult conversation, I promise you that you participated in creating the circumstances that led there. Okay. Sorry you feel that way, very like, oh, well, I didn't have anything to do with it. You feel that way and you hold your own feelings over there. And there's a lack of taking responsibility and a lack of participating in the conversation in to a level that gets you both back to the connected place. If you're in relationship with someone, you want to restore that relationship, or hopefully if you're having this difficult conversation, that's the assumption. And so you want to create connection and safety again. So sorry you feel that way pits you against them or in a different space as them, sorry, in a different space from them. And what you want to do is bring yourselves back together. So avoid that as well. All right, let's talk about some mistakes, and then we'll have a little bit of fun. Okay, common mistake number one when it comes to difficult conversation: no objectives. Oh my goodness. What do you want to get out of this conversation? What do you want to say? What do you want to do? What's happening? If you're distracted or you're unfocused, you're going to miss the mark. And what can help us, or what can contribute to us missing the mark? Usually when we are heightened in our emotions and we jump into a conversation. And so I like to say take the 90 seconds or take as much time as you need to, if that's possible. If you need to jump in right away, then take the 90 seconds, go to the bathroom, get a drink or what have you. But if you can prepare for a couple days, then great. But usually if there's like fear, if there's anger, if there's shame is a big one, guilt, embarrassment, defensiveness, any number of those like unpleasant feelings can really course through our bodies during a conversation that we'd rather not have. And some of us react by confronting, some of us react by withdrawing. Um, and sometimes we may even toggle between the two. We might get really aggressive and then we might like back off and so on. So it's really helpful for us to keep a goal in mind, to have an objective. Like my objective is to be calm. My objective is to reconnect with this person, to understand this person, is for us to come to some sort of resolution about the decision we have to make. What is your objective, so that you don't get distracted by your emotions, distracted by even some things that the other person might be saying. You had in mind to come to a decision, and then the person said something, and then you just harped in on what the person said because maybe it was an insult or you felt it was an attack, or whatever the case might be. So common mistake number one: having no objective. Have an objective for your conversation. Common mistake number two: battle mode. Battle mode, battle mode, if we are in battle mode, we want to win. This is a win-lose situation and we're going to come out on top. There That is going to produce counterproductive habits. That is going to produce anything. We will start manipulating, threatening, giving ultimatums, lying, stonewalling, silent treatment, passive aggressive behavior, closed off, sarcasm, shouting, insults, like all the things come out. Oh, you don't even know what you're talking about. Well, you didn't, well, you did, and all the kitchen sink from back in the day. Well, you remember when? That is battle mode. Win by any means, by any means necessary. And we're not trying to have a war here, right? Difficult conversations with the people that we care about and that we love are for the purpose of getting us back to the place where we are in healthy relationship with the other person. Okay. So that's common mistake number two when we're in battle mode. Common mistake number three: assuming intent. I know what this other person's thinking. Oh my goodness. The optimist thinks that this disagreement is just a misunderstanding between two well intentioned people. Right? That's us going in. We're naive and we're like, we're just going to have this conversation, la di da di da. It's going to be hard, but we both really want to come back to connection with each other. We love each other and all the things and all the things. And you might be in a conversation with a whole pessimist. Pessimist, the difference of opinion is actually an ill-intentioned attack against the pessimist. And so the pessimist will hear or filter words as an attack. And so when we assume the other person's intent, this person, oh, they're just trying to annoy me. They're just trying to get on my nerves. They're just trying to waste my time. And I know I've said these things. They're just this, they're just that, they're just, and we have no clue. We have zero clues whatsoever. Right. And so when we start to assume the other person's intent, we trigger our filter. And so whatever they're saying, we are filtering it through and we are chalking it up to supporting evidence for our own personal verdict. They're just trying to, and it's usually not a positive thing, usually not. Okay. So we don't want to assume intent. We want to be open-minded, and give the person our listening ear if we do care about them and the relationship. Common mistake, last one, number 4, is rehearsing, which is different from preparing. So when we have a script in mind, and I don't know, I used to do this. I used to script like, okay, this is what I want to say, and then this is how I'm going to say it, and then this is how they're going to respond because I said it like this, and then I'm going to say this, and then they're going to say this. No, it doesn't happen that way. So if we have a script in our minds, it will hinder our ability to be present, to track well with the other person, and to listen, right? To listen from a place of desiring to understand. And that's what fuels, connection and relationship. If we really are listening and we really do want to hear the other person, throw the script out. It doesn't mean we don't prepare. Preparing is for ourselves. That's us doing our due diligence. Like, what happened here? Right? How do I feel about what happened here? What is it that I'm hoping to achieve by having this conversation? Those are introspective and reflective questions that we ask ourselves to prepare to enter into the conversation so that we can have a right objective, or so that we can have any kind of goal or objective in mind, so that we can regulate our emotions, right? So that we can do our due diligence to ensure that we are listening, right? So rehearsing is different from preparing, and rehearsing is unhelpful because once the script goes off, when once the other person goes off script, then we're like, oh no, I don't even know where to go. Right now we're improvising, like it's a stage play. So we want to prepare, but not necessarily rehearse. So that's a common mistake as well. All right, let's get into the benefits. We'll talk about some stats, and then I think we'll be almost done. All right, relationship benefits. It fosters difficult conversations. It might sound counterintuitive, but difficult conversations, if handled well, actually fosters greater respect in relationships. Respect for self, respect for other, respect for the relationship itself. It fosters a sense of maturity in the self, right? So learning, getting the skills that are required to have these difficult conversations, right? Leveling up in our communication skills. It's a badge of honor on some level, right? It helps us to know that we are maturing and that our relationships are maturing as well. They're no longer like petty temper tantrum relationships that we used to have on the playground when we were kids. It fosters closeness and intimacy, right? We gain more trust when we are able to come through these difficult conversations with the respect, with honor for our partners, our family members, our work colleagues, or what have you. And you will be seen as and see others as people of integrity, people of maturity, people who can handle themselves as adults. Um, it brings a sense of satisfaction and fulfillment in relationships. We can come through. We can go through anything. Oh my goodness, how many times have I heard, if I bring this up or I express myself, I'm afraid that they're going to leave. I'm afraid that they're going to give up on the relationship. So there's a sense of satisfaction. There's a sense of fulfillment, and also safety in the relationship when you're able to go through some of these difficult conversations and come out on the other side and still be good. Right? You're like, oh, okay, no, we're in this together. We're both working at this. We're both fighting at this. Um, And there's a sense of fulfillment there, because just because you have an argument or a difficult conversation doesn't mean one person's going to check out of the relationship. Well, I quit my job because my boss told me that they didn't like the project that I did. You know what I mean? Like things like that. We know that we're in it to win it, where we can stand strong. There's a level of commitment there. And that brings a sense of satisfaction and fulfillment in relationship. And then, of course, relationship benefits solve the problems, right? So if the issues are coming up, they present, some angst in terms of the relationship itself. Kind of avoiding, or you kind of feel anxious when you get into their presence or what have you. If you solve the problems, then you can get rid of all of that stuff. Okay. All right. Some stats: 66% of people feel stressed or anxious if they know a difficult conversation is coming up. Uh, Let me see. Oh, yes. Uh-huh. I just clicked out. Sorry about that. I want to say 70 odd percent of people prepare for conversations, while only 42% warn the other person that they should prepare for conversations. And then 70% of employees at work avoid difficult conversations, including negotiating raises. My goodness. I don't know. How many of you have ever had to negotiate a raise? I've never had to negotiate a raise, but um, that's obviously something that people don't really like to do. All right, let's talk about the art part, and then I'll give you some practical suggestions of phrases that you can start out with. Okay, pair. That is the number one strategy. We have to talk. That is a phrase that usually, you know, stirs up some kind of angst. It might as well be a curse word in some relationships. Um, but if we care about the relationship and we care about the other person, then we walk into it from a completely different disposition, completely different perspective. The soft startup is a strategy from the Gottman Institute. And we'll go through some phrases in a minute, but it's a strategy on how we can demonstrate care, even though we're going into a difficult conversation. Do you actually care for this person? Do you care about how they feel? Do you care about what they want? Do you care about the outcome of the relationship? Do you care about the relationship going well? Do you care about the health, the longevity of the relationship? Right? If you don't care, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how invested you are in or how invested we might be in cultivating the skills that are necessary to come through these difficult conversations well, right? And so, I was talking to a couple, and um, the gentleman said, "Well, I." I asked him, I said, do you actually care about how she feels? And he said, no, I don't care because she did something wrong. And I said, well, that's going to be an issue, because we can't approach the other person and the conversation in a way that's going to get us connected again if we don't actually care. If we don't care about the other person, do we care that we may hurt them, right? Do we care? And if we do care, then we'll probably be very much more careful about the words that we say. If we care about whether or not they're going to be hurt, right? Do we care more about, well, I'm hurt people hurt people? Oh man, can we level up? Can we move away from that? Right? So number one strategy for tips and tricks, or the art of difficult conversations, is care. Care about the conversation, care about the outcome, care about how you show up, care about what you say, care about how the other person feels, care. Okay. Number two is prepare, and we've talked a little bit about that already. So um, prepare for the conversation, and again, that leads back to caring. If you care, you'll likely prepare for the conversation. So you want to start from a place of, curiosity. Start from a place of respect, honor, um, and ask yourself the questions, right? What happened? How am I feeling about this? You know, ask them what they're feeling, what's going on for them, how they perceive things, right? It's a conversation back and forth, um, and be willing to share the real parts. Sometimes we think, well, I don't like this, and I don't like that, and I don't like this, and so on and so forth, but we never really share how we feel, Like I felt, kind of ashamed at that point, or kind of embarrassed, or I felt, really small or inadequate. I was humiliated. Um, or I was hurt. I was disappointed. Sometimes we miss the sharing of actually how we feel, right? And so in our preparation, when we get to that place, we have to be able to figure it out and admit it to ourselves first, right? So prepare, do the work, right? What happened? How am I feeling about it? What are the objectives here? What do I want to see come of this? What would resolution look like, right? And so preparing is another sort of tip or trick. So care enough to prepare, and then hear. Hearing has to do with um, active listening, right? So we want to listen to the other person. We want to open up the conversation so that they get a chance to speak, and we are actually listening. We're listening to understand, not to respond, and we're hearing what they're saying. We're hearing what they're saying, right? We're not trying to, prove anything or change their minds or get them to agree with us, or, convince them, manipulate them. Nothing. It's just like, I'm hearing what you are saying. I'm asking you questions about it. I'm actually interested. That goes back to the caring part. Do I really care? Um, and then you want to like track with them and reflect. Okay, so this is what I'm hearing. Paraphrase, check in, ask. We talked about this during our listening episode, right? Paraphrase what they are saying. Check in. Am I hearing? Am I hearing properly? Am I hearing correctly? And then ask a question. Okay, so talk to me. Tell me more. What? How did that translate to this? And how can I? And all the things, right? So we want to care. We want to prepare. Then we want to hear. We want to clear, right? So we want to be clear and direct. The like going around the mulberry bush and around this and all this stuff, like cut that out. And if you prepare, you'll be clear. So prepare to be clear. Okay. So go in, very direct, very open, very honest. And this doesn't mean insulting people. I heard somebody say the other day, like, I'm just honest. I'm just honest. And I said, no, you're actually just honestly mean, because the words that you're saying are rude. They are rude and they're mean, and there's never a reason to say those words. You can talk about how you feel and your opinion without belittling other people. You can, I promise. It's possible. Most of us do it pretty good, right? Um, and so we do want to be clear, but we want to prepare so that we're clear in a way that honors our relationship, that honors the other person, that demonstrates, care and respect and regard, and that gets us to our objective, which is to reconnect and to solve some of the problems, or the problem that the difficult conversation is about. And then, of course, we want to repair. Okay, repairing means solving the problem, right? We want to reconnect, or repair the relationship breach, and then we want to um, sort of brainstorm options that get us to a place of mutual, sort of mutual understanding or mutual agreement, or what have you, for that moment and for that specific conversation. So those are the tips and tricks, or the art part, right? Care, prepare, hear, clear, repair, and that will help you through a. I wish. Oh, you know what? I didn't even think to do that. CPHCR. Okay, it doesn't really spell anything. I didn't think to do that. But anyways, um, if you guys do this, I promise your difficult conversations will get a lot easier, a lot quicker. All right, here's some suggestions, and then we are done. Um, Suggestions for a soft startup. This is how you might want to enter in very softly, smoothly, calmly into a conversation that might be difficult. Um, I highlighted my two favorites, but I'll read them all. I have something I'd like to discuss with you that I think will help us work together more effectively. That's good. I'd like to talk about blank with you, but first I'd like to get your point of view. Ooh, that's nice, right? That's hearing already. That's already hearing. I love this one. I need your help with what just happened. Do you have a few minutes to talk? I need your help. So we're appealing to them. We're getting them to buy in, and we're actually opening up to hearing them and being curious about what it is they have to say before we jump in with, well, this is what I think, and this is what I want, and this is what I didn't like, and right. I love that. I need your help with something. Can we talk about it soon? Very similar. Um, I think we have different perceptions about blank. I'd like to hear your thinking on this. I'd like to hear your thinking on this, right? I care about what you have to say. And again, it will be very evident, very obvious very quickly if you don't care. You won't take the time to prepare. You won't enter into it with honesty. You won't be hearing. You won't be clear. And you won't take the time to prepare. Okay. Um, well, I'll just do one more. I'd like to talk about blank. I think we may have different ideas about how to blank. Okay. So those are just some soft startups, and you guys can Google. There's so many more. Google John Gottman and all of his strategies for avoiding the four horsemen of the apocalypse, which are again ways of behaving, ways of responding that lead to the ending of a relationship, and they derail and erode the quality of relationships that we can have. All right. Personal challenge, always act. Okay, so this week I challenge you guys to go and act, apply what you've learned, change something about yourself, and teach somebody something. So whatever you've heard here today, whether it's one thing, one strategy, one mistake, some do's and don'ts, hard conversations, and so on. I want you to apply something. Apply one thing that you've learned, and I'm going to get you to throw it into the chat. Something that you learned today that you're going to apply this week. C is to change something about yourself. So look within yourself. Hey, have I been saying some of these no-go phrases in my difficult conversations? Do I have a difficult conversation coming up? And do I care? Right? Have I prepared? Am I willing to be clear and to hear, to repair? Right? So change something about yourself, your approach, and then teach something to somebody else. That means just share something that you've learned here today, put it into practice, and teach it as you put it into practice. And then again, pick one thing and act on it this week. What are you guys going to act on this week? Throw it in the chat. You can also unmute and shout it out to me. And then this is my announcement. I'm doing the leadership game. I'll be I didn't put the link in there. Okay. Well, we'll throw that in next week. But we're going to be I'll be doing the leadership game with organizations. If you are part of a group, a team, or a company that is passionate about leadership, that wants to level up their leadership, the leadership game is a fantastic tool. I am a facilitator, and you can call on me. Just send a quick email to cornercounselor@gmail.com. And I will come into your organization, your business with your leaders, usually 5 through 10 leaders, and we will play the leadership game, which levels up your leadership. I also do lunch and learns and trainings, and so I'll be getting more into that. And I have a few coming up, whatever, in October, this month. But if you know that you have a company, a group, a team, or even a group of friends that you guys want to really delve into, like personal growth, communication, some of these things that we're talking about when it comes to relationships, because this stuff will help your entire life, not just your marriages and your romantic partnerships, not just your friendships and your girl or guy group, but it will help your work. It'll help your business. It'll help, it'll just help you. Okay. So you can let me know, drop me an email in the chat, and then we can chat about that. All the replays will be available after the season is over at the end of the month on the Mentiverse app. Season 1 is already there. You can download the app on Google or Apple. Mentiverse, Mentaverse. And next week, y'all, I am so excited about this. This is one of my absolute favorite topics ever when it comes to relationships. How to give a good apology. Guys, you have never heard this before. It is going to be awesome. So join us next week on the relationship series for how to give a good apology. You will learn, and I promise you, it will make your life better. It will change. This will change your life. This changed my life. When I learned how to do this, this changed my life. It's a game changer, 100%. So we'll be talking about that next week. Here's me, IG Corner Counselor, FB Corner Counselor. Me, I'm Genevieve Allow, cornercounselor@gmail.com. You can hit me up, link me, reach out, and we will continue our awesome conversations on the relationship series. Thank you guys so much for joining in. I am going to stop the recording, but we can stay on and chat a little bit more. Thanks again, guys. See you next week.